It seems like Escape from Tarkov and Helldivers 2 have made the tag team duo for what may be the two biggest fumbles in video game history. We're going to talk about all that on today's episode of AZTV News, which I swear I'm going to start doing consistently one day soon in the future, maybe. The great and wise philosopher Harvey Dent once said,
"You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain."
And that may be an actual universal truth, especially in gaming. Square Enix, Activision, Blizzard, Bethesda, BioWare, hell, even CD Projekt Red couldn't escape having a villain arc. Please, Larian, stay pure. For a while, it had seemed like the indie and AA space were the last bastions for ethical business practices in the gaming industry. But of course, if that were true, we wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be making this video, and the 3-month streak of no AZTVN would continue to thrive. But alas, here we are. The gaming industry never fails to figure out ways to wage war against gamers, their main consumer.
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
The two villains of our main story today come in the form of Escape from Tarkov and Helldivers 2. Let's start with Escape from Tarkov. This hyper-realistic first-person extraction shooter developed by Battlestate Games recently announced that after 14 years of development, the game is fully releasing and will have no predatory microtransactions. Of course that's not what happened. What'd they do? They added a new, more expensive purchase tier for access to their never-ending beta test as they continue to duke it out with Star Citizen for the world record of whose game can not fully release for the longest. This new tier is in addition to the 3 tiers that already currently exist. There's the $50 standard edition, a weirdly priced $82 Left Behind edition, a $110 Prepare for Escape edition. There was a now discontinued $150 Edge of Darkness edition, which we will now refer to as EOD. This newest tier is called the Unheard edition, and it'll cost you $250. Now listen, I can get behind live service games, drip feeding content through early access release. I can even understand absurd pricing on these packages. Hell, I spent $500 on the Kickstarter for both Ashes of Creation and Star Citizen. We see how that's going. At the end of the day, these packages are meant to be a way to support the game's development, and in exchange for your support, you're getting access to an incompleted version of the game and potentially some additional goodies that hopefully do not convey any type of gameplay advantage over others. But Tarkov devs decided to go in a different direction, we'll say. Now, I don't play Tarkov, I'll be honest about that, so feel free to correct me if I say something that's inaccurate. But this is my understanding of the situation. Now, up to this point, anyone who purchased a game, any version of the game, all got access to the same content. The only difference should have been that you were getting small things like stash space or something like that, or maybe better affinity with the vendors so you get cheaper prices. I don't know how it works. However, the Unheard edition differs in that in addition to increased versions of things that you got from other tiers, they added expanded pockets, more slots on the free market, a unique in-game melee weapon, increased mail retention time, additional background screen options, and access to the early test server. Yes, you heard right. They're giving players access to a completely separate test server to test things before they push them to the ongoing beta test, which means there's almost certainly another test server that players don't have access to that they use to develop and test things before they send them to the early test server so that the players can test the things before they go to the beta test. I don't understand.
And it will be like a taco inside a taco within a Taco Bell that's inside a KFC within a mall that's inside your drain.
This is what live service has done to gaming. And finally, and most importantly, the last two things that you get in the Unheard edition: free access to all subsequent DLCs and access to a PvE co-op mode with persistent progression. Here's why those things are so important. Remember that discounted $150 Edge of Darkness edition? One of the things you receive with that edition was also access to all subsequent DLC. Any reasonable person would interpret access to all subsequent DLC as, when new content comes out, my $150 investment into this unreleased game ensures that I will have access to that content. Well, sorry, reasonable people, you're fucking stupid. Or at least game director Nikita Boyanov thinks you are. Because according to him, PvE Game Mode, this is not DLC. Okay, I'm sorry. The PvE Game Mode is not DLC. DLC, in their understanding, is the major additions to the game, including various functionality and content that are released after the official release of the game. Now, there could be a translation issue here because it basically sounds like Boyanov is saying because the game hasn't fully released yet, features being added are not DLC, and thus the PvE game mode is not DLC, which means it's not covered under the season pass that you would have gotten if you got the EOD version of the game for $150. By the way, this was not a slip of the tongue. He has said this and doubled down and even tripled down on this. Obviously, this went over horribly. They received a bunch of backlash. Aside from the insane ratio that this one tweet got, everybody was firing shots at Tarkov devs. Everyone from your run-of-the-mill, unhinged twit-tards all the way up to big content creators that are like active in the FPS space. Now, what happens after game companies start getting held accountable and they're also getting blown the fuck out on social media? They backpedal. They backpedal like they're trying to reverse the rotation of the earth. And of course they backpedal, because after doing basically some incremental compromises that only seem to piss people off more, it was settled on giving the EOD players access to the PvE mode when the game fully launches. So I guess he's keeping to the idea that it's not DLC until after the game is launched. Additionally, they offered a separate microtransaction specifically for the PvE mode. And coupled with that explicit microtransaction, they also offered a discount for EOD holders who want to upgrade to the Unheard edition. They also offered the game mode itself at a discounted rate for EOD holders as well. And finally, after all the backpedaling, that's kind of where we ended up with a lot of this situation. So I'm really curious what you guys think about it. EFT enjoyers, where are you at? Where do you fall on this? Have you lost confidence in BSG? Is it time to jump ship and head for gray zone warfare like so many people seem to have been doing over the past couple of days? Let me know in the comments, guys. Next up, we got to talk about the Helldivers 2 drama. Okay, real quick, this is how it all went down. Helldivers 2 announced that it would be mandatory for PC players to link their accounts to a PSN account. After they announced that it would be mandatory to link the accounts, players got real ass mad about it, and at first, I didn't really understand the problem. I thought it was just kind of a trivial thing. We all have a bunch of accounts that we have to make. It's endemic at this point. Every publisher has their own distribution platform. So we all have to kind of just suck it up and live in this hellscape that is an unlimited amount of distribution platforms vying for our account information, right? It turns out that the PSN region locking is actually like pretty severe for a lot of countries. Some people can't get PSN accounts. Now, when I say some people can't get PSN accounts, I mean this goes everywhere from they just don't have access to PSN, or at worst, I think the only way they can get access to a PSN account is if they have a PlayStation console, which would mean you're basically spending $500 to get an account to play Helldivers 2, which is ridiculous, right? Now, I had heard that there was region locking, so I decided to look into it, and I found the SteamDB tweet that listed all the countries that it said that PlayStation Network was locked in. And at first glance, I thought this was a little weird because among the countries that it was supposedly banned in, Japan was on that. And obviously, PlayStation Network isn't banned in Japan, as far as I know. That would be ridiculous, right? Sony is based out of Japan. So what I had to do is I had to do my own experiment. Obviously, this isn't a big brain experiment or anything like that, but I looked at the banned countries. I got a VPN. I picked one of the banned countries. The country I chose was the Isle of Man, which then I looked at their flag, and they have this monstrosity as a flag. This thing looks like the anus of a creature from a H.P. Lovecraft novel. This is what I imagine conjoined triplets wearing a thong looks like. Ooh, wait a minute. It's Legsy from the Sons of the Forest. It's Legsy. I got super sidetracked there. So after I used my VPN, put myself in the Isle of Man, which was one of the banned countries, I tried to buy the game. To my surprise, I actually could not buy the game. There's no pricing for it or anything like that. And so it seems like the player outrage was actually vindicated this time. So much so that one of the players asked, hey, I can't get a PSN account. How do I play the game? The Helldivers CEO replied that he has no idea.
Somebody asked, PlayStation Network isn't supported by my country. What do I do? The CEO of the company responds, I don't know.
So obviously this does not go over well. The Steam page ends up with overwhelmingly negative reviews in such a short time span. I mean, at one point this thing had like 90% negative reviews, and we're talking in the hundreds of thousands of negative reviews. It put so much pressure on Steam that Steam just started giving refunds regardless of playtime. So there's probably some people that have like 1,000 hours of Helldivers 2 playtime, and they could have gotten a refund. The pressure that it put on Steam, the fact that the data is all out there, everybody's seeing it, everybody's talking about it, that puts pressure on Sony. Now Sony finally had to acquiesce, and they finally removed the requirement for the PSN accounts. They immediately followed up by saying that they're still learning what PC players want. They still haven't fully understood the PC player landscape. And honestly, that's kind of how things concluded on this story. Here's my opinion. This is a win for the players, 100%. It shows that applying pressure and voting with your dollar can make these companies change course if they're doing something that the player base doesn't want. However, I do think that there is something very important that's being left out of this conversation. Everybody agrees them rolling back the changes is a big win for everyone. However, I don't think that enough credit is being given to Steam as a platform when it comes to looking at this particular drama. The amount of data that Steam brings to the surface bolsters players' voices. The access to the API, the review system, the refund system, all of this stuff brings customer feedback to the forefront of the conversation. It forces companies and ignorant consumers alike to confront the data and make decisions based off the data being shoved in their faces, basically, because everybody was essentially posting the graph of like, oh, look at how many negative reviews that are on the Steam page for Helldivers 2. And this is why I think it's important to shout out Steam, essentially. This is why players choose Steam. This is why Steam can charge steep premiums to host games on their platform. And this is why, and most importantly, companies hate Steam. They don't want to pay the premium. They need Steam's reach, and they want access to Steam's customer base, but they want it without getting Steam's consumer practices. And that's unacceptable. This is why games like Escape from Tarkov can do the things that they're doing to their consumer. They don't really have to worry about pushback until enough big names have reported it and like have some skin in the game. So in the Helldivers situation, while we can all agree that this is a victory for the players, for the gamers, for the consumers, it is only made possible in large part due to a platform that amplifies the players' voices. And there needs to be more rejection of platforms that suppress player voices, like Epic Game Store, where only approved publications can even give a review on the website. All that said, congrats to the Helldivers 2 community. And also, I do want to say, good on Sony for rolling back the decision. Even if it's only because of the pressure that comes from like public backlash, I still think it's important to acknowledge when companies do the right thing, because if they only get scolded. Whenever they do something bad and they never get praised for like fixing their wrongs, then it makes it seem like it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. And if that's the case, if it doesn't matter whether you do a good thing or a bad thing, where you're only going to see bad criticism, negative criticism, then the incentive doesn't exist for you to do the good thing, and things are only going to get more combative with the player base. Anyway, that's it for me. Thank you guys for tuning in to AZTV News. Until next time, stay chill, keep it real. Peace.